the movie that got made, the first one that got made was Wise Guys, the Brian De Palma movie with Danny DeVito and Joe Piscopo, and I wrote that when I was about 27. I actually wrote Bad Boys before I wrote Midnight Run. Bad Boys was Paramount purchased the screenplay, and it was a pitch that I had, and I pitched it to Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, and Don was great, and may he rest in peace. He really, Don was one of those guys where you could go sit down with him, and he was very fast, and he didn't want. It's so much different today where you do the very detailed pitch. And you say the guy drives a red Chevy and, wears a blue suit. I mean, today they want everything and they still don't know. I mean, it's a whole different business. Don would say, what's the story in 25 words or less? If you could tell it in 25 words or less and he could see a movie, he'd say, fine, go write it. Here's a check, go write it. And it was real old Hollywood stuff, which again it's not like that today. Today it's committees and this and that. And, by the time you get the job, you're like, why did I want to do this in the first place? It doesn't even resemble what I had in my head, But so I wrote Bad Boys first, and Marty Brest, who had just done Beverly Hills Cop for Don and Jerry, they gave him a script to read when I handed it in to them, and he didn't want to do another cop movie because he just did a cop movie. So the way Midnight Run happened is like one of those strange things. I'd seen Marty around the lot, the Paramount lot, and I didn't know him. And I was walking. I remember I had a meeting with Don and Jerry, and this fate. I was walking to my car, and I forgot something, and I went back to the office and got it, to Don and Jerry's office. And as I'm walking back, who comes through the parking lot but Marty Brest? I figure, well, I'll break his chops a little bit, So, and we hit it off instantly. So I said, hey, Marty, I understand you read my script. And he goes, yeah, it was a really good script. He said, but I just don't want to do another cop movie. And he said, what else have you got? And I said, I've got this half-baked thing in my head about a bounty hunter. And he was like, oh, what? There still are bounty hunters today? And I was like, yeah, believe it or not, there are. And they still operate under like some obscure law from like 1853, because it's you're kidnapping somebody, and but you're doing it because someone hired you to do it. So it's a weird law, And if you read it, it's like something right out of the Wild West. If one man pays another man, to capture a third man, anyway, it's just. But anyway. And so Marty says, well, tell me about it. So we went back to his office, and I sat down. And I said, look, this is all I've got. I've got this guy, and and the guy's an accountant, and he gave money to he stole money, and he gave it out to charity, but because he found that he was working for a mob accountant firm, which is something I read about in the paper. There was a guy that was working for a mob boss and didn't realize he was doing his books. I thought that was an interesting character idea. Gave it out to charity. I mean, basically the story to Midnight Run.
It was foolish. But taking $15 million of mob money and giving it to charity was good for a lot of people.
Oh, so you pissed off a mafioso killer just to be loved by a bunch of strangers. That makes a lot of sense.
Don't you want?
And Marty said, it sounds great. And I remember I was sitting, there's a coffee shop not far from here. There were no cell phones then. And then I was checking in my messages at home, and one of them was, Robert De Niro wants to do Midnight Run. And I was like, I hung up. It was my agent. I hung up and I was like, Robert De Niro? I mean, this is comedy. And I was like, really? Then I was like, well, that could be a brilliant idea. I just never, but because Jack Walsh, that character was such a, he was such a pent up guy. I was thinking like, that's genius, So I started telling my friends, they were like, get the out of here. I'm like, no, for real. It's like, it's the message I got. So anyway, then I met Bob, and he couldn't have been nicer, and then started the whole process of who was going to play the role of Jonathan Mardukas, and every actor in town came in and read for that part. I mean, at one point, I remember Cher had just come off of Moonstruck, right, and won the Academy Award, and Paramount was pushing Marty very hard to cast Cher in the role of the Charles Grodin part. And I mean, really pushing hard. And to the point where I remember we were sitting around in his office. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, because we were always working on the script. And he goes, what do you think of Cher? And I'm like, and I remember saying to Marty, well, it's a different movie to say the least. And I mean, De Niro's going to say to Cher, I'm going to stick your head in a toilet bowl and make it stay there? I says, well, and he was like, you're right, God damn it. I mean, I think for like one maybe hair of a second, he was considering.
If I hear any more shit out of you, I'm gonna bust your head and I'm gonna put you back in that hole and I'm gonna stick your head in the toilet bowl and I'm gonna make it stay there.
I mean, I had no idea who that actor should be. But when Grodin came into the room and sat next to Niro, and he started with him, it's like you knew instantly, oh my God, this is just great. He was just, he did this sort of repelled kind of thing where he was staring at Bob, and I mean, you knew instantly, oh my God, this is it.
And I'm not very popular with the Chicago Police Department, okay?
Why aren't you popular with Chicago Police Department?
That's a whole other... What, do we know each other?
Why?
Why?
Marty said, I want Charles Grodin to play the part, because I think they did a screen test. And Paramount wanted to, star the movie, and Marty said, no, that's not what I want to do. This is the movie I want to make. And then he called Casey Silver at Universal, who was the president, I think, at the time. And it was like Thursday. This is no bullshit. Thursday we were at Paramount, and Friday we were at Universal. And then Marty said, you're coming with me. We're gonna go make the movie, and I need you there every day. And I was like, okay, great.
Well, I think a lot of people wanted to play the role that I played. Bob De Niro was set, and I remember several hours of auditioning on more than a couple of days, hours and hours on end. Well, they let me improvise, and when they said that, I thought I had a good opportunity, a good chance of it happening.
You seen any suspicious-looking characters around here?
No.
Do you live around here?
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing like if you can have it actually develop between the two people. It is something else. So this is after several hours of doing this, and then Marty Brest, the director, he called me from an airplane. He wanted me to fly out to do a screen test. And I said, well, what is it you want to see that you haven't seen? Because I'm a director, And I couldn't hear what he said. Well, when you do a screen test, you have to agree to a payment. What you would get if they want, you have to agree to that ahead of time. So I asked for like 4 times what I had been getting. And he called back and said, if you didn't have to do the screen test, would you do it for less? I said, sure. So that was like 2.5, 3 times of what I was getting. And that's how it came to be. But it's amazing. I think even Robin Williams, God rest him, wanted to do this. And someone told me recently that De Niro said, I don't want to do it if it's not with me. Who knows?
When we change buses in Chicago, you're going to have a couple hours. I think you would be a better man if you use that time to look up your ex-wife and daughter. It's a perfect opportunity.
I think Paramount wanted to do it with Cher. Go figure. Yeah, I don't know who the head of the studio was at that time, but I know a few years later when they wanted me to do the Beethoven, Ivan Reitman wanted me to do the Beethoven movies, the head of the studio said he's not likable enough. Now, I don't remember knowing this guy, and Ivan, who never met me, said he's plenty likable. And that was the end of that, because Ivan could say that he had done a lot of big hit movies. And I think about something like that for somebody to say he's not likable enough. It's probably because I treated him the same way I treat everyone else. And I just have the same way of talking to everybody.
Why were you so unpopular with the Chicago Police Department?
I remember sitting in a room with Marty Brest and De Niro, and me, I'm never at a loss for words, and he doesn't say all that much, What about and he says, why doesn't somebody type up what Chuck is saying? Never forget that.
Are you familiar with a dish, of a potato dish, Lyonnaise potato? It's a kind of a fried potato.
He did whatever he was doing, and it seems to work for him. I don't even know. It's hard for me to even, I just kind of relate to the situation instinctively and just go with that.
How much is the coffee?
It's 53 cents.
How much is tea?
53 cents.
Love tea.
I just kind of show up, and somehow it's kind of, I think what I do is, after 8 years of studying, I just kind of like lend myself to it. And there I am with this guy. He's taking me in to where I'll probably be killed, and and I can just go with it. I just go with that reality and listen to what he's saying and what's going on. You know, it's just what helps that I don't deal with nerves. That's a big deal, and I because I've done a fair share of directing, it's unusual. Most people do deal with nerves. It's kind of natural to deal with nerves. I like to say to people that I'm never more relaxed than when I do a one-man show because no one will say, why is he talking?
Jack, you're a grown man. You have control over your own words.
You're goddamn right I do. So here come 2 words for you. Shut the f up.
Jack? What? Which further do you think we have to go? None of your business. No, because, you know, eventually I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom. Shut the up.
I particularly remember there's a scene where we jump aboard a freight car of some kind in a train, and we're like, I'm trying to keep him away from me, and he lets himself down through the roof or something like that. We're definitely, he's got a big problem with me, but the scene after that, we seem to be friendly, but there wasn't any scene. So Marty Brest is sitting in a corner of this freight car. De Niro's warming his hands over a fire that he lit, and I'm sitting in the corner handcuffed to the side of the car, and I'm just supposed to do something that makes him friendly with me again. It wasn't written at all. So I was doing what I'm doing, and I remember Marty Brest coming over and leaning down to me and saying, you know, I just, you know what I think of you, but this is not working. Okay, you know, suddenly I've got that responsibility. That's where I said, you ever think of having sex with an animal?
Did you ever have sex with an animal, Jack?
And that got him. That actually did, because he wasn't going to look amused or bemused for the sake of the scene. He wasn't going to do it. I mean, it's an interesting way to go.
There's some good-looking chickens there, Jack. You know, between us.
Yeah, a couple there might have taken a shot at.
I particularly remember the Rapids scene, which was done in Arizona, and you really would have died. You would have frozen to death. You couldn't go into it, and they had to pull me out instantly. First of all, I began to sink and freeze at the same time, and then they pulled me out, and De Niro came down. He was supposed to swim across this body of water. He said, "How is it?" I said, "When you're swimming, keep your hands in your pockets." So we went to New Zealand to film that, and I mean, I'm sure it was better. It's a big year, 1987 for me, because my son was born that year. So I remember that, you know, something.
You blew it, all right? You had the guy 4 days, Jack. 4 days. You could have walked him backwards and not blown it, but you blew it.
But Bob De Niro is a character actor. Jeff Bridges is a character actor. Tommy Lee Jones is a character actor. These, you know, Spencer Tracy, Bob Duvall, Peter Sellers. You know, where the character embodies them. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. That's when I grow up.
What do you think? I'm trying to stiff you?
You? Never. He would never try and stiff me.
Do I detect some kind of sarcasm here?
Never.
Where
never.
Where have I inherited this reputation? I have never done business with anybody, and Jerry is my witness, that I have ever. Does that phone ever ring? Has that phone ever rang with a complaint about me? Never.
The way I heard about this project was Marty Brest was somebody that I knew socially. I knew him from New York, and we had the same agent, Harry Offland, and Marty was. I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Listen, you know, I'm doing this movie with Bob De Niro, and I knew De Niro from around the area, and when he was coming up, you know, I would see him in the Village all the time, and I was a fan of his work, but you know, actors are very competitive by nature, so it's like playing chess or tennis, you know, and you have to you keep your eye on the ball. I I didn't have the luxury to be in awe of anybody, you know. If anything, I was envious of the rung that they were standing on, and how could I knock them off that rung? So he said, that, you know, there are these two guys in this thing, and you can play either one of them. Read the script and tell me what you want to do. And it was the two guys that chase Chuck Grodin's character. So I said, I don't want to play those guys. You know, I'm not interested in that. He said, well, what do you want to play? I said, I want to play the accountant. He said, well, that's not going to happen. He said the only part that I said, well, what about the bail bondsman? He goes, no. He says, I got this whole idea. You're too young, and I want him to be big and fat. And I said, well, you know, I want to be in your movie, and that's the only part that I'd be willing to play. He says, well, then you got to come in and earn it. The other two guys, I'll give you one of them. You know, but if you want this part, you got to come in and win it. And so I went in and I remember going in and I was reading with De Niro.
Isn't Serrano the guy that ran you out of Chicago when he was running things back then?
He didn't run me out.
Yeah, right. You give up being a cop to do this shit.
De Niro held out his hand and he says, "Where's my money?" And I took his hand and I shook it. I shook his hand like, you know, my buddy, and I cupped his hand and I said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "Don't be, you know, stop it. You don't trust me? What do you think? I'm not going to pay you?" You know, I put his hand on my heart, whatever I did. But I could see De Niro wake up like, you know, like, oh, this guy's got something going on here.
I mean, it's only a matter of time before Serrano vanishes this guy from the planet, and I'm out $450,000.
You're out $450,000 on this guy?
No.
No.
Because I got you, and you're the best, and you're going to find him and bring him back.
And then later in the day, my agent said, I got good news and I've got bad news. He said, the good news is you got the part, but the bad news is the movie just went into turnaround. And they're not doing it at Paramount. The following day or 2 days later, it was set up at Universal. So I had a job.
Jesus, Jack, where the hell you been?
Jack, I want to talk to him. Jack, where are you?
Once I got the job, now they were auditioning the guys that played my assistant, the guy that worked for me. So they wanted me to read with Bob De Niro and the actors that were coming in for that part. So I was in the room with Marty and Bob and Michael Chinich, who was the casting director. And I think Bill Gilmore was the producer. And what was really compelling to me, what I learned was I saw some really terrific actors that I really admired their work. And they came in and they lost their lunch over De Niro. They completely lost their game face, you know, and they were compelled to tell him what he meant to them. And every time they opened their mouth, they lost a job. And there was a break. It was like a 15-minute break where everybody got some lunch, you used the bathroom, and I was just hanging out in the office with Michael, and Michael, you know, said, you know, it's the 5 minutes in this room that determines whether you're not, you know, this is where you win the job. And if you don't come in with your game face on and have that determination to get that job, once you get the job, going to work is easy. You know, that's where the fun is. But it's coming in here and doing what you need to do in order to create a character that's convincing and appealing and you know, that is that perfect piece, because we all want, and everybody that comes in, we want them to be great. You know, it's embarrassing as a buyer. You know, when somebody comes in and they're not prepared, or it's embarrassing. It's uncomfortable to watch. So that was probably the greatest lesson I ever had.
Got him. Already?
Sure do. Want to say hello? Say hello to your bail bondsman, Eddie Moscone.
Hello.
Jack, I love you.
Hey, scumbag.
The name's Carmine, go.
Yeah, well, Carmine, today's your lucky day.
I get this call from a casting person in New York. And I was in LA. And she said, I'd like to meet you. And I said, okay. So I go in for the meeting. And she said, you know, John, I'm doing this film that there's nothing in it for you. But I really wanted to meet you. But there's absolutely nothing in this film for you. And I said, well, that's fine. She said, I saw your production of True West. You and Eddie were just fantastic. And I said, well, what's the film? And she said, Beverly Hills Cop. When we started that film, Taggart and Rosewood were very, very small parts. And they'd shoot Judge and I sitting in the car, you know, drinking coffee and looking up in the room and stuff like that. So, you know, Marty would shoot that for 2 or 3 takes. Okay, we got that. Then Marty would come over and go, why don't you guys start ad-lib? Because he liked the stuff I was doing in the audition, so you guys start ad-libbing stuff. So they roll the cameras, and Judge happened to have a magazine that he was reading in between takes, for real. So they roll the cameras, and Judge opens the magazine, and he goes, wow, did you know that by the time you're 50 years old, there's 12 pounds of undigested meat in your system? And I looked at him, I said, why are you telling me that? What makes you think I have any interest in that at all? And he goes, well, you eat a lot of meat. And they left it in. I mean, Marty was wonderful that way. So our relationship and our characters built over the time, and we become co-stars of the film, you know, and originally they weren't very big parts. Segue, a couple of years later, now we'll get into Midnight Run, a wonderful, wonderful actor, and the best breakdown script person I ever met in my life, who has since died, bless his soul, Alan Vint. I'm at a play. I'm going to see Joey Pants in a play, Joey Pantaleone. And we're at intermission, and Alan comes over to me, and he says, have you read Midnight Run yet? And I said, no, what's that? And he goes, it's a movie they're doing. He said, you're perfect for it. And I said, I haven't heard anything about it. And he said, well, you get the script and read. And he said, you're perfect for this. You got to do this. So I call my agent and stuff, and I get the script, and I read it, and I said, man, I got to do this, you know. Marty's directing it, right? So I call Marty, we have a meeting and stuff, and he said, yeah, you'd be good in this. You'd be really good in this. And I'm waiting for him to offer me the role, you know. And he goes, well, yeah, you'd be really good in this. And I said, yeah, and he goes, no. So he said, you want to use your audition for it? And I said, what do you mean audition for it? And he goes, well, Bob wants to audition with everybody, which is wonderful. And you don't see a lot of stars doing that. And Bobby's wonderful that way. And he wanted to read with everybody. And he was there for it. It's not like you're reading with a casting director. You're reading with him. So I go into the audition. And Marty, of course, I knew Marty, and George Gallo was there, the writer, who wrote a great script. And so, you know, they're all in the room, and I'm outside waiting to go in, and there's 30 guys out there reading for Dorfler. And they're all pacing up and down the hallways, and, oh God, I gotta read with Bob, you know, and they're like freaking out. And I was so excited, you know, because I'm a stage actor. I couldn't wait to get in there. And I knew that role was mine. And I said, nobody's taking this role from me. Nobody's taking this role from me. And there were some pretty good actors in that hallway. So I get my turn, I go in. And George Gallo, the writer, and Marty, and producers, everybody's sitting in there. Bob is sitting there, hi, nice to meet you, and blah, blah. So we small talk for 15 seconds or 20 seconds, and Marty said, hold on a minute, I gotta go do something. And he gets up and leaves with George, and I know and Marty hasn't admitted this, but I know he just wanted to leave me and Bob alone. So they all leave, and so Bob and I sit there and chat for 2-3 minutes and stuff. So they come back in and we start reading this scene. And we got the script, and Bob says, well, here, and he goes to hand me something in the middle of the reading, and I go to reach for it, and he dropped it on the floor. As I tried to grab it, he dropped it on the floor, and he just stared at me. And I looked down on it, and I looked up at him, and I said, "F*** you." And he said, "F*** you too." I said, "F*** you." Like he wanted me to pick it up. I said, "I ain't picking up the thing up, f*** you." But we did it in character, you know? And, okay, cut. Well, I got it. And I found out later, from George, actually told me, when I walked out of the room, Bobby said, "I want him." Because I'll bet you that every other actor picked it up and handed it to him. "Here you go. Sorry, Mr. De Niro."
Looks like a package deal to me, Mom. God damn it. Come on, both of you.
I have to tell you, Marty is the most, I have so much respect for him. I mean, during the course of that movie, I was young and he was breaking my balls a lot, okay? But he made me the best writer I could be. It was never good enough, to the point like I wanted to f***ing choke him, okay? But he was like, "Is this the best you could do?" Well, if it's not the best you could do, why did you give it to me? I mean, he would just, I'd be like, I'm trying to work out some ideas, you know, and he's just tough. But he is steadfastly committed to making it great, you know, and nothing will get in his way. You know, he just is very, very tough, and I guess could be perceived as difficult. But he's only difficult to the people who don't appreciate what he's doing and how much he gives a shit about what he's doing. So I guess, yeah, you know, if you want something to be great, right, and you could be perceived as difficult, but I'm all for it. You know, he really, that movie is what it is because of him. You know, Midnight Run is a comedy, and yes, it's a comedy, and it's the kind of stuff that I prefer to write. Afterwards, I got pulled more and more into the genre of comedy, and I have to tell you how many people don't understand comedy. If the situation is funny, okay, and the actors are playing it totally straight, you laugh. If you start like piling on this sort of isn't it funny kind of, the thing becomes self-aware and goofy to me, and I don't find it funny anymore.
Where are they? You got me. Inspector, shut up.
Marty has a tremendous strength that, and I if I could pat myself on the back, I guess it could be perceived as a strength. I guess it would be, you know. But we love characters. We would just, Marty and I would sit around and talk about people we grew up with. And Marty grew up in the Bronx, so I grew up in Portchester, so we grew up around these very sort of ethnic neighborhoods, and these places are just chock filled with these characters. You know, like my dad was a character. You know, my uncle was a, you know, habitual gambler, and you know, I mean, always at the track, and you know, and my mom was a character. You know, and to put up with all of this, and there's just a lot of fighting going on all the time, but a lot of love at the same time. Like people would literally tell each other they go F themselves, and 2 seconds later they're hugging and kissing. It didn't mean anything. It was just a lot of noise. You know, and if I may take credit. Yaphet Kotto was my idea. I said to Marty, when I wrote it, I was thinking of Yaphet Kotto.
His real name's Mosley.
I'm Mosley!
The funniest thing about, like, the Alonzo Mosley character, for instance, is that basically he doesn't crack a smile, you know, until near the end. And I said to Marty, I said, look, man, if I was on the run, Yaphet Kotto, there's just nothing, there's like no nonsense with Yaphet Kotto. And if Yaphet Kotto was a Fed, you know, I would be very nervous about that, you know. And Yaphet's the sweetest man in the world, but when he's on camera, he's just got that tough persona where, like, if you make a joke, he'll just keep staring at you. Like, he's just not going to break.
Why don't you quit? Be cheaper for both of us.
And for Dorfler, Marty had done Beverly Hills Cop. I was thinking of John Ashton, but I was thinking of the John Ashton character had he in Beverly Hills Cop, had he kind of been slightly behind every conversation, you know, like. But I liked something about John Ashton.
Who the f*** are you? Are you writing a book? Who the f*** are you?
Dennis was a good friend. You know, he died about 6 months ago. Yeah, Dennis was great. For that part, I know they read a lot of people, and Dennis was on Crime Story, I think, the TV show. He was an ex-cop, ex-Chicago cop. But I don't know what he'd done before. That was sort of, I think, a big role for him, like a breakout role. He was great. I liked Dennis a lot.
The f you smiling about?
I love to travel by train.
Oh, yeah? What do you think this is, a class trip?
Part of why I think that script was so good was that I didn't know what I was doing in a way. And I shouldn't say that. I knew what I was doing in terms that I had a love for film, but I had no real clue as to what it took to shoot these scenes. You know, like, oh, they fall in the rapids. Yeah, they can swim, they can fight in the rapids. That'll be great. Now that I've directed 9 movies myself. Now knowing, like, rapids, are you fucking nuts? Do you know how hard it is to shoot in rapids? You know, you naively write about blizzards and things. Oh, it's the worst blizzard ever. Do you know what it's like to shoot in a blizzard and faking snow and wind, and then you got to loop everybody afterwards because of the fans? You know, I think he was deadly serious. You know, he's a very serious guy in a lot of ways. You know, but I think with me, I have to say I have a very warm place in my heart for him. You know, even though, you know, it's not like we talk a lot. We talk from time to time, but I for some reason he responds to honesty and he hates bullshit. As far as I could tell, I mean, just despises it. So he always seemed to have a twinkle in his eye, you know, like when I was telling him stories, because he too, like Marty, just loves people and loves characters, loves what makes them tick. So like whenever I would talk about people, you know, he would light up, you know. No, we had a lot of fun, actually.
All right, in 10 minutes, we'll be at the Western Union office. We'll have $500. I'll buy you a nice juicy steak or whatever you want, okay?
3 on eggs.
Huh?
3 on eggs.
I'll get you whatever you want.
There's a lot of sentiment in that movie. You know, it's counterbalanced by other things. You know, it's like a lot of times with making a movie, you can get sentimental, which the movie does, if there's something to balance it, which is all the cursing and the, you know, and that, you know, that sort of, it's that nasty sort of thing that balances it out. So it's not just all syrupy.
I got a problem. I can't fly. I don't think you're taking me seriously.
When I was finished with the last draft of it, I said, I can't do any better. I mean, I bled, I wrung out everything I had into it, you know, and I was also nervous. I said, if this thing goes down the toilet, then I'm really because I gave it all I had. Like emotionally, I felt like I'd be, you know, sort of broken up, you know, but it was so well received. You know, the critics loved it. I mean, I think there was only one bad review out of like hundreds and hundreds. It came out the same day as Die Hard. So, and I remember, strangely enough, the producer of Die Hard called Marty, because everyone said Midnight Run was going to be the thing that was going to blow up, you know. And the producer said, could you move the date? Because we're nervous. We don't want to open a Bruce Willis movie against a Robert De Niro movie. Because Bruce still hadn't, that was his bust-out movie, Die Hard. And then Die Hard ended up doing better than Midnight Run.
See you in the next life.
See you in the next life.
Midnight Run became such a part of the lexicon. So, I mean, if you get to do that once in your life, you're lucky, you know? Yeah, it was a great time. I wished I could go back and tell that younger kid, you know, this is about as good as it's ever going to get. You know, so sop up every moment like a biscuit in gravy, you know, but I was a young guy, you know, I mean, just running around having fun, and maybe I experienced it the way I should have, you know, I just enjoyed it.
I looked at it recently. Yeah, it's a good movie. It's everybody in it. Everybody, you know, the Joe Pantaleone, you know, they're all like, wow, born to play these parts. Yeah, I really had a very good time there. It's my favorite movie. If, you know, to say why, I don't know.